Welcome everyone to PACE Child and Family Therapy Services' first ever webinar. My name is Elizabeth and I'd like to thank you so much for joining us today. We had an amazing response to our online survey, which we sent out to the families who currently use our service. And we used the questions that those families asked us to shape the content of this webinar. If you did have a specific question that is not covered in this session, then please do get in contact with us. You can email childandfamily@thepacecenter.org. I will remind you of this email address at the end of the session. Furthermore, we are also running teletherapy sessions, which many of you are already accessing. So if you would like to book a session, then please again get in touch. This webinar is being recorded and will be available afterwards via a link, which we will email out to you within the next few days. Feel free to watch it again and indeed pass it on to whoever you would feel might benefit. There is a question and answers box, which is to the right of the taskbar in front of you on your screen. It looks like a speech bubble with a question mark in it. This is being monitored during this webinar by me, and whilst we will answer those questions, there will not be time in the session today to address them live. You will see in the question and answer box a section called My Questions, so please put your question in there. So to begin, for this webinar, we have 5 of our expert therapists who will be presenting on 5 main sections. Attention and engagement and sensory with Lindsay Hardy, our clinical lead. Communication with Laurel, our lead speech and language therapist. Gross motor with Sonia Pike, one of our expert paediatric physiotherapists. And fine motor with Rachel Murrill and Kristina Grimm, 2 of our paediatric occupational therapists who specialise in upper limb and handwriting. So now I'd like to hand over first to Lindsay, who will begin for us this afternoon.
Hi, I'm Lindsay and I'm delighted to be chatting to you this afternoon about attention and engagement, how to support those with your children, and also about sensory processing and how to support that. So first of all, about attention and engagement. Okay, so these are key things that we need in order for us to be able to play and learn new skills. So what we want for attention and engagement is for, as much as possible, for our children to be in what we would call a calm, alert state. So this is when we feel safe, that we feel happy, that we can attend and engage for a length of time. This is where we can be, we're in the present, we're in the moment, we're engaged with an activity right there at that time. When we're not in that calm alert state, we can be in what we would call a high alert state, and this is when we have more anxiety or worries about things. We're more likely to be highly distracted and move away from activities or engagement with other people. We can become somewhat aggressive perhaps, and bite or hit might be something else that we might see in these when we're in a high alert state. When we're in that state, our bodies and our brain we're not really interested in attending and engaging and learning in new skills or socializing with people. We're more interested in getting away from and worrying and concerning ourselves with other things. The other end of the scale is that we could be in a lower alert state, and that's when we're feeling drowsy or disengaged, somewhat sad. Our movements are reduced. We look a bit low tone, a bit not ready for movement. So when we're in that situation as well, when we're in that state as well, we're not in a position to attend and engage and learn. So what's really key for us is to observe where our children are in this alertness scale, and before we can try and get them to attend and extend that attention time, we need to get them into that calm alert state. Hoping that Luke can move me on to my top tips. So in order to help your child to attend and engage and then learn new skills, first of all, what we need to do is help ourselves as adults to be in that green zone, in that middle zone, be in the present, to be calm. That's not easy at this time. We have additional stresses and strains, and recognising that is actually going to be helpful. So a bit like when you get on the plane and you're given instructions to, if should we need oxygen, that the oxygen mask will come down and you should put yours on first before you deal with your child. It's the same principle here. Help yourself to be in green, to be calm, before you try to support your child to attend and learn more new things. So when we look at our children, just recognise and relate how your child is in that given moment. Are they in a heightened alert state, or are they in a low alert state? What would help them to get into that calmer place? Sometimes that's reducing information in the environment for them, taking away, putting away toys, putting away things. And sometimes, yes, it might be about bringing more into the mix, if you like, bringing out something new that might engage. So helping them to get in that calm alert state is really key for us then to help them to engage. What we want is also activities that are at what we would call at the just right level for them. So if we're too demanding of our children, and sometimes that's a real pressure for us, we feel we're desperate for them to learn and get on and do something different and new, but actually that can also create a lot of stress both in them and us as the adults around them. So making sure that we give them something that's just the right level for them, even though that might be simpler than we would be choosing, but be okay with that. Start there. Children are very good at showing us through their play and their where they are attending what actually is meaningful to them. So find that just right level, and then start your social interaction, your communication activities, your play activities that will then lead to learning. Something that really helps as well is to be prepared to play alongside your children. So some of you who have older children at the moment at home trying to do homeschooling, you might notice that actually they will do it if you're just even sat next to them, not actually doing the same task maybe, but being alongside helps us. So playing alongside also helps us to be in the moment with our child, so be in that green place, be mindful of what they're doing. And that will support them to attend for longer. Keeping it simple, again, go back to what they're interested in now, and then you can build from there. So by keeping it simple and following your child's interests, you'll capture their attention and engagement. And then you can slowly challenge that and push them a little bit further by introducing something that you think might be helpful to, or your therapist has told you to engage with. And remember to celebrate the small steps. Look for the tiniest little next step with your child. Forget the big ones, just think about the small ones, and celebrate in yourself as well that you've supported your child to make that little extra attempt, engage and learn. Okay, we're going to move on to a brief summary of sensory now. So thinking about sensory processing, a lot of you had a lot of questions about that. So when we talk about sensation in for us, we have 8 different sensory systems that we can pick up sensory information from our bodies and the world around us. And the idea is that sensory information is sort of like food for our brain, really. It tells our brain what's going on in our body and our brain. And also that sensations we experience can fuel our behaviours. So what we do is we observe when we maybe give a child a food that they don't like. What we might see is, again, those red behaviours that we've just been talking about appear then. So if they don't like the taste of the food or the tactile aspect of the food, then we'll see that withdrawal, that push away, that fight, that anxiety coming in. So a hyper alert sort of experience, if you like, a high alert, we might call that defensiveness. The same might be true for sounds. We might have children who are hypersensitive to sounds. They don't like the sudden noise. And again, you'll see the running away, the moving away, the anxiety or the aggression coming through in those situations. The same for visual. We might not like flashing lights, bright lights. That might be too much. And again, we'll look at those what we call high alert behaviours, the withdrawal, the pushing away. And that would be true for all of our sensory systems. We can be too hypersensitive is a word we might use, and not like that experience. On the other hand, again, we might have low responsivity to sensory information. So not noticing when someone touches you, not noticing the taste of something, not really noticing a pain in your body when actually typically people would notice. So we might have what we would call low alert responses to sensory experience as well. Sensation is really important for us. We want it because, as we said at the start, it's like food for our brain. So what we want is, again, we want to get into that place where we can have be calm and alert with our sensory experiences, so we can go out there and learn about our bodies, learn about the world around us. So if we move to our top tips again. So when we're thinking about sensory processing in our children, we want to become sensory aware as the adults around them. So we're going to observe those behaviours in our children when they experience a taste, a touch, a sound, a light, information, and notice what was the behaviour there. Did they notice them? Did they over respond, do you think? Then we want to think of sensations like ingredients. It's like having a larder of sensory ingredients, and think, right, what would be helpful for my child in this moment, to try and get them again into that calm place where they can explore sensory experiences comfortably and at ease. So when we see those red behaviours, we want to reduce the type of sensory experience that we think has created that red behaviour. Then we want to try and introduce those very sensations. For example, if we have children who are sensitive to food textures, then we want to give them a go at exploring those textures and food items, perhaps away from meal times. Make it a play activity. Introduce it when you know they're in that calm green place. The sensory exploration doesn't need to be specific to an activity or a time. Introduce it rather when they're calm. Try a different, as I say, try a different time, or during another activity, bring a different sensation, try those sensations out. If you see blue behaviours to sensory experiences, don't notice pain. I'm not suggesting you increase your pain, by the way, pain experiences, but maybe point out to them, oh, that hurt, did that not hurt? And point out to them things they might not notice. Or if it is something like sounds that they don't seem to notice, try pointing them out to them using vision and sound together, or bringing their hands to something that has a sound, and trying to reinforce the sensation that comes with that. Again, you might want to get their arousal level or their alertness a little bit up, so movement often helps that, and then you can bring in your blue behaviours. When we're thinking about using sensory experiences, often we think of very technical, high-level sensory activities like snoozelands and going to your therapy centre to see your therapist and all the marvellous equipment you might have there. But actually, it can be much simpler than that. And you, as the adult, are actually the ultimate sensory environment for your child. You can sing to them, you can have them follow your face with their visual skills. You can rough and tumble type play, gives us lots of movement experiences. So giving them a hug, all of those are sensory experiences that you can easily offer up many times during the day. And just look for sensory options in everyday objects and activities around your home. Again, our world is full of sensations. We don't need to actually buy any in for the most part. So exploring the leaves outside, digging in the garden, making a shaker out of an old cup with a lid on and putting some beans in it. There's lots of options that you can have that are just around your home. Hope that's helpful. I'm going to now pass you on to Laurel, our lovely lead speech and language therapist, who's going to give you some more top tips on communication. Thank you for listening.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Lindsay. As she said, I'm going to introduce some top tips for communication to develop your child's receptive understanding and their expressive language and communication whilst you're at home. So first of all, we're going to keep the conversation going. You're going to take turns in whatever your child is doing. This is the beginning of conversation. So pet the dog, take turns, make faces or making sounds, funny sounds, and take turns. Take turns in songs or music making. If you found that sensory experience of banging the pots, you know, make it a turn-taking interaction. Follow your child's lead, as Lindsay said, and participate with whatever they're interested in. Just go with them and they'll allow you to take some turns in between. Have fun. That's the most important thing in keeping a conversation going. My next tip is to repeat your key words a lot. Choose a key word around an activity that you're using and use it a lot. So sock, sock off, sock, I see sock, socks off, pull sock, sock, I've got sock, socks. Just keep repeating. You'll notice in that I added occasional words to the one. So if your child is using however many words your child is using, just add another one to your sentence. So if they're saying sock off, you're saying sock off, pull, or pull the sock off. So you've added another word. Try to limit your questions in this kind of situations and try to limit using the command say this. Instead, model what you'd like your child to say, and they are much more likely to repeat it. My next tip is to remember that children need time. They need time to process what you're saying. They need time to process how they're going to answer or respond, and then they need time to formulate that response, whether that's a point or a word or a sentence or an answer to a particular question. You might need to say what you've said or ask your question, model your response, and then wait. Count to 10 in your own head. It's not too long. It feels long, but it's not. Silence allows your child the chance to respond. And my next tip is to read to your child as often as possible. Reading is an excellent way to expand your child's vocabulary, to sequence and develop your child's language and early literacy. Again, the level isn't important. If it's a picture book, point to the pictures, always point to the words too. And you can ask some questions, but not more like find the. So you make it into, again, an activity that you do together rather than a question and answer. Children like to read the same books over and over again. That's great. They're learning when they do that. So go with it and enjoy reading at all times. And my last tip is to use visual supports and augmentative communication. Research demonstrates these supports aid language learning and they will increase expression with your child. So use whatever you've got around you, whether that's photos or pictures or symbols, signs, or just things in the environment, objects around you. You're pointing out about the tree or look at the wind blowing in the tree, point to it, point those things out. And that will aid your children's understanding of language and their ability to use it. I hope that's been helpful, and now I'll hand over to Rachel Murrill, our occupational therapist.
Hi, thank you, Laurel. Now we're going to be looking at some of the questions that you were asking about how to develop hand skills, which are really important for playing, for getting dressed, using cutlery, drawing, writing, and just generally becoming more independent. And development will vary from one child to another. There's lots of reasons why children might find it difficult to develop these skills. And if you've got any questions or concerns about your child's development, you can speak to your child's therapist. But here are just some top tips for developing hand skills. We're going to start with the first one. Children learn through play. So just like Laurel said, have fun. Encourage them to use their arms and their hands to reach out, to touch and to grasp. Hold and explore a different wide variety of toys, objects and different textures. When you're holding and cuddling your child, you can encourage them to reach out, to hold and touch your face or your nose, and then just smile and laugh together. Play is a brilliant way to connect with your child. Secondly, our second top tip is use what you already have at home. You don't need to go and buy expensive toys. You can help your child to develop their hand skills just by letting them explore safe, everyday objects at home. Blankets and scarves are great for playing peekaboo. Try covering up your face with a scarf and then encourage your child to pull that scarf away to find you. You can play hide and seek by showing them one of their favourite toys. Hide it under a scarf and encourage them to pull away the scarf to find their toy. Putting objects inside and out of cake tins, any containers or pots are great ways of practicing picking up objects and letting go of them. Moving objects of different sizes, different weights, different textures from one tin to another. You can use everyday routines like bath time. It's a great chance to encourage your child to play simple games. If you have a variety of easy to hold objects in the bath that you can bang together, splash together, and just have fun. It's great to be able to pull and push toys under the water. Our next top tip is to explore with your senses. Just like Lindsay mentioned earlier, you can help your child to reach and to explore different objects with different textures, whether that's indoors or outside. Another thing you can do, why not make a treasure box full of bits and bobs, all sorts of objects of different textures, from a sponge to a wooden spoon, a silky scarf, a hairbrush, and you'd be surprised how much fun children can have just exploring a box, tipping it all out and putting them all back in again. It's really important to encourage your child to use their hands in a variety of different positions, whether they're lying on their tummy, lying on their back, sitting in a chair or sitting on your lap. Crawling on hands and knees is a really important way for children with their hands open and weight bearing through their arms is great preparation for developing fine motor skills. In that position, they're getting lots of sensory input, which also helps to strengthen their shoulders, their arms, their core and their neck. And our last top tip, lots of learning involves using two hands together. It's really important for children to be able to develop fine motor coordination and also hand dominance. When babies bring their hands together, they discover both sides of their bodies. And they realise that when they can hold objects close to their face, it makes it easier for them to look at an object and helps them to develop some visual attention. You can play games like blowing raspberries on their arms or hands, singing rhymes with hand actions like round around the garden or this little piggy went to market. And other activities to encourage your child to use two hands together are things like games involving clapping, banging hands together, banging objects together, bringing their hands to their mouth, reaching out to pop bubbles, or if they're lying on their back, reaching to find their toes. Even just sitting in front of a mirror and encouraging your child to reach out in front to touch their reflection. They're all fun ways of using two hands together. You can play with toys that involve pushing and pulling, and you can even make some noise by playing and shaking musical instruments with two hands. Again, those don't need to be expensive. If you can shake it or bang it, it's an instrument. If your child tends to use only one hand, you can place toys closer to the other hand to encourage them to use that hand as well. So now I hope that's been helpful. I'm going to hand over to Chris, who's going to give you some more top tips on developing the next stages of hand skills. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Rachel. Hello. Hi, my name is Chris, and I will share some top tips about how to support your preschool age children in their fine motor development. So when you look at the difference between the hands of a preschool age child and the hand of a 7-year-old, you can see why fine motor skills like drawing and handwriting are so much more difficult for a younger child. Their hands are not fully formed yet and just not quite ready for those small and tricky fine motor movements. The most important tip I have for you really is let your child play and explore with their hands. It's the best way to prepare them for school. And don't feel under pressure to work on skills like handwriting too early. Next slide, please. So there are lots of things you can do to support your child in practicing those fine motor skills. I'll give you some examples. So let your child help you with cooking and baking at home and encourage them to play with Lego, Duplo and other constructive toys. Let your child practice to dress and undress themselves independently or with little help of yourself. And gross motor play like climbing, jumping, running are a great way to strengthen those big muscles that are really important to work on the fine muscles and to develop fine motor skills. I'm also a big fan of Play-Doh. It's a really motivating way for most children to use their hands and build up finger coordination and strength. Next slide, please. I would like to also give you some ideas how to support to develop your child's pencil grasp. So a child's pencil grasp develops up until they're about 5 or 6 years of age. There are many activities you can do to help your child develop a functional grasp that is comfortable and allows them to color and to write efficiently. So when we hold a pencil, we use 3 fingers, the thumb, the index and the middle finger, and that's called the tripod grasp. So my top tips for developing a functional grasp for your child is to challenge those 3 fingers and make them strong and coordinated. So some ideas for that would be, for example, to thread beads or pasta shapes or Cheerios onto string or pipe cleaners, peeling off stickers, pressing small objects or sticks into Play-Doh, picking up dry beans and dropping them into small containers, putting paper clips or pegs around the edge of a laminated piece of paper. There are so many things, everyday items at home that you could use to strengthen those 3 fingers. And lastly, I would like to share some tips about working on pre-handwriting skills. So I recommend that your child uses broken crayons and short pencils to color and write with, because it encourages the 3 fingers, so the tripod grasp. Let your child color or mark make and write in shaving foam and sand and other sensory materials. Just make it fun and make it encouraging for the child. I also often put a big piece of paper against the wall. Writing on vertical surfaces improves wrist mobility and pencil control. And remember, children will write very big to begin with, but don't worry, it will get smaller when the hands are ready. So I now will hand over to our physiotherapist, Sonia.
Hello. Hello there. I'm Sonia, one of the physios within PACE, and I'm going to talk to you today about our top tips to support your child's continued gross motor development. Firstly, the gross motor development term refers to the physical skills that we usually acquire during childhood as part of a child's motor development. These skills require the development of control and coordination of the large muscles in the body, which allow for head control and the movement of limbs to develop skills such as rolling, sitting, stepping, throwing, skipping and jumping. Developing a new skill is often termed as sort of working towards a milestone and then reaching a milestone. And children will often develop milestones in a similar order, but the milestone attainment will vary depending on the individual child, their personal and family history, and the environment they're in. So our top tip, number 1. As several people have already commented, the best thing to do is to keep it fun and incorporate play as much as possible whilst working on your therapeutic goals. This enables your child to participate in therapy without them really noticing. It keeps them engaged and motivated, and it may take a little bit of thought on your part, but incorporating play will keep them on task. Think about the next motor milestone you're working towards, and think about your child's favourite things to do, and see how you can try and incorporate the two together. Help them to act out one of their favourite stories by including rolling, walking, turning around to a different part of the room, or to reach for toy pieces and puzzle pieces. Think about different props or sensory props to their favourite song, and get them to reach out at the correct time or uncover objects. For example, if you're seeing Old MacDonald, you can have a cow and a chicken, etc., and get them to sort of go and find them in the room before you sing the song, or just reach for them depending on their ability. Another option is using a cardboard box. You can make this into a train, a plane, a tractor. Help them to climb into it, roll into it, or if they're working on sitting, just prop them up in the corner and use some nice imaginary play to keep them engaged in the task. As much as repetition is useful during an activity, also try and keep a variety of different activities through the week just to maintain their interest. Top tip number 2, preparation. So before starting an activity, think about the best place in the house or the room to complete it, and whether you have everything you have to hand, whether you need to hand. Make sure, if you're providing physical assistance, that you're in a good position and that you're able to maintain your comfort. You should try to avoid stooping, bending and twisting throughout the time that you're helping your child. As Lindsay has explained, movement is a sensory experience. Lindsay's given us very specific details earlier, but prior to working towards your next motor milestone, which is going to be a challenge, we need to think about preparing our muscles and our bodies to be ready. This may be increasing the child's awareness of a certain part of their body through weight bearing or big squeezes or vibration. If they've got increased tone or stiffness in their legs, then you might want to help them reduce this by cycling their legs, making sure that they're in that green state, that they're calm and relaxed and they're well supported. It may be helpful to use the equipment that you've already been provided with, or their splints. If the child has sort of lower tone, then you might want to try and get their muscles switched on a bit more, make them more alert. This might be completing some exciting activities. Again, weight bearing, vibration, different textures. And for some children, they're going to have a mixture of both high and low tone. So you're going to have to think about how you can balance those activities to make sure the part of their body needs to be relaxed is relaxed, and the part that needs to be more alert is alert. Our next tip is about getting your family or the child's siblings involved. You only have one pair of hands, so make sure you have someone, well, if you can, use someone else if they're around to provide help with the activity. Or the distraction by reading the story or singing the song, so that you can just concentrate on providing the physical support. If any family members are participating in their own exercise regimes, then you can try and adapt and include the child in that activity at their own level. And siblings will always enjoy races. So you can move from A to B in the best way for that specific child or parent and child, and you can make the races different depending on the abilities. Our next tip is be kind to yourself and try and be realistic. We've all entered this lockdown phase of 2020 on our own path, and it's important that you take each day as it comes and acknowledge that some are going to have more successes than others. Our children are going to go through their own mood cycles, and their abilities are likely to show variation too. So don't worry if some days are harder for them also. Set small targets and goals for yourself in relation to their therapy timetable, as you can always do more on the days where more time appears. Try and make use of your daily routine. For example, every night going up to bed might be a lovely time to practice climbing up a couple of stairs or a flight of stairs, depending on your abilities. In the same way that everyone's current situation is different, all our children follow a different developmental pathway. If a child is finding a specific activity too tricky, think about how you can make it easier or do a similar thing in a different position. Our changes in situation have allowed some people extra time to think and research different things online. You may have new questions about different treatment options or be missing the opportunity to talk through your thoughts and worries in a regular face-to-face session with a therapist. Remember, there is no one size fits all, and different choices will be right for different families and different children. Our final tip is to keep in touch. So the therapists at PACE continue to work and remain here for you to help you with all the above. Whether you're finding all the typical therapeutic activities too tricky at the moment, or you're looking for a new challenge, talk to the team that know you and your child, or arrange for an assessment so that we can support you in any way that would be of use. I'm going to pass back to Elizabeth now, who's just going to finish up.
Thank you. Well, everyone, thank you so much for coming and listening to the webinar today. We hope that it's answered many of your questions that you've had and that you found it beneficial. If you would like answers to anything more specific, please ask us. We will send out a link to this webinar over the next few days so you can watch it again or indeed pass it on to others. We'd love to get your feedback, and I've put a link to our feedback form in the questions and answers box to the right of your screen. We would love to hear from you. I will also put our email address in the question and answer box, which you can use to ask questions or to contact us for advice or teletherapy sessions, and that is childandfamily@thepacecentre.org. Thank you once again for joining us today.